Okay, girls, we're going to go ahead and get started because you were on time and I like to be respectful of your time. So the others will join us as they can and won't miss much. So anybody can watch later and catch up. So I want to open us just in a word of prayer to get started, if you don't mind bowing your head. Father, I just thank you for this opportunity. It's been hard and fun and enlightening, and you've been in it all the way. And I just thank you for being with us tonight in each individual house, because you're not just in one location. You live in each heart. You fill each room. And so, Father, I pray as we open your word that you would reveal to us what you want us to know, that you would help us to go deeper and find out something new that we can apply to our lives in this time. And we just love you and thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, hope you've had a good week. I thank those of you who have gone on to the Facebook page and have posted both your corona emotions and your purpose for this time in our lives. And if you have not done that, please do, because it is so awesome to read what everybody else is writing. So I know if I feel that way about it, the rest of you who may read those things would feel that way too. And if you don't post, then somebody does not get the benefit of what you had to say. So I think it's really important. I won't bug you about it, maybe. So I hope you'll just go ahead and do it tonight when we get through, or so on. There will be another thread started after this session, and we'll talk about that later. But they're all going to stay up through the whole study, so you can post in each one of them. So I want to start with just a little bit of a recap of last week. So this is our third session. The first week we covered King Xerxes and his banquets that he held, 6 months for one and another week of banqueting for another, and how he asked his queen, he didn't ask her, he told her to come appear before his male party goers, and probably a room full of drunk guys is what it was. And she refused to come for whatever reason. And he was so angry that he divorced her. And then there is a 4-year gap between chapter 1 and chapter 2 of Esther. And that is probably the time where the history books tell us that he went to war against Greece, because that was the only thing he really had left to conquer. And he didn't get the job done. Greece was able to defeat him in a 2 to 3 year war. So he came home, and in the 7th year of his reign, 4 years after chapter 1, it says that he begins thinking about Vashti, his former queen, and he missed her. And so before he could do something like try to get back with her, his advisor said, hey, let's have a contest and you pick a new queen. So chapter 2 is where we were last week, and this is where we meet Esther, because marriageable young women were really girls, probably early teens, were rounded up. And what we have in the Bible in the 2nd chapter of Esther is season 1 of The Bachelor, because there is really nothing new under the sun, as Ecclesiastes says. So we have a beauty contest that goes on over a year in length, because all of the girls that were brought to the palace, it's estimated maybe 400 girls were vying for the king's hand in marriage to get the rose, the final rose in the rose ceremony. And they got a year's worth of beauty treatments before they ever met the king. And one by one, they were each taken to spend a night with the king, and he would then send them to his second harem. They did not get to go home to their families. And they basically, unless he called for them again, because he had evidently tons of concubines besides a wife, unless he called for them again by name, they were pretty much doomed to live as a widow. And most of them would have been a childless widow. So just in his desire to pick a new queen from all these women, he changed the life trajectory of hundreds of people. So he's the ruler of the biggest kingdom in the known world at that time. And he's pretty much into himself, if you haven't figured that out already. So at the end of chapter 2, after he picks Esther and she's been crowned queen, her uncle Mordecai, who nobody knows is her uncle because they don't even know she's a Jew, he's around the palace, and he happens to hear 2 of the king's eunuchs, which are servants that have been castrated. We went through that little story. And he overheard these 2 eunuchs who were angry with the king and had made a plan to assassinate him. And so he reports this to Esther, who reports it to the king. And she does say that the guy who's let us know about this is named Mordecai, but she still does not reveal her connection to Mordecai. And the plot is uncovered and investigated, and the king has those two eunuchs executed by hanging on a pole. And it's not hanging like we think of in a Western movie with a rope around the neck. It is being impaled on a sharpened stick. Just so you know, things are not light and warm and fuzzy and pretty in this kingdom. And Mordecai's efforts to save the king's life are recorded in the big book of all the king's stuff. And then not thought of again, but it's going to come up. So we got on into chapter 3 last week, and we covered the first little part, because then we took a detour, and that's where we ended last week. But chapter 3 opens with the 12th year of King Xerxes' reign. So this is 5 years after Esther became queen. So we had a 4-year gap between chapter 1 and chapter 2. We've got a 5-year gap between 2 and 3. And even though we read a little bit of chapter 3 last week, I'm still going to start at the beginning tonight. So chapter 3 of Esther, verse 1, says, sometime later, 5 years, King Xerxes promoted Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, over all the other nobles, making him the most powerful official in the empire, second to the king, of course. All the king's officials would bow down before Haman to show him respect whenever he passed by, for so the king had commanded. But Mordecai refused to bow down or show him respect. So Mordecai's got some kind of business that he does. He's some sort of an official in the king's palace, that somewhere around the gate. And when Haman would ride in and out and to and fro, people would bow down and prostrate themselves on the ground before the great, wonderful Haman, except Mordecai. So Mordecai stood large while all these other people are on the ground. It's very noticeable that he's not bowing down. And there are speculations as to why this might be. It doesn't say exactly. But the two main ones are that because he's Jewish, even though we don't really have much evidence that he was a practicing Jew, and he had not returned to Israel when the captives were allowed to go back, he stayed in Persia. There still was probably enough Jewish heritage in him, and he was raised to know that you didn't bow down to anybody but the one true God. And so that's a possible explanation for why he would not bow down to Haman. The second possible explanation is, we're told in verse 1, Haman is the son of Hammedatha the Agagite. So King Agag was the king of the Amalekites. So an Agagite is a direct descendant of King Agag, not just an Amalekite, but a descendant of that king. And that's where we had gone off into chapter 15 of 1 Samuel and learned about this ancient battle between King Saul and the Israelites against the Amalekites, because God told the Israelites to go utterly destroy the Amalekites, kill them all, even the women and children and all the livestock. So Saul goes up against him, King Saul, and he kills everybody except the best livestock and the king. And Samuel the prophet hears about it and comes to Saul and says, what have you done? And Saul says, I've obeyed the Lord your God, and I want to sacrifice to the Lord your God. And Samuel is just furious with him and says, why am I hearing all these, cattle lowing and these sheep bleating? You obviously did not do what the Lord said. And because of that, your kingship is basically ended. God is taking it from you. And then he had Saul bring King Agag before them, who probably thought, oh, whew, I was able to miss the bullet. Well, but he didn't miss the sword. And it says that Samuel the prophet hacked Agag to pieces before the Lord. Ugh. Okay, it's gross. So that's where we ended last week, on that lovely bright note. So chapter 3, verse 3, it says, then the palace officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, why are you disobeying the king's command? They spoke to him day after day, but still he refused to comply with the order. So they spoke to Haman about this to see if he would tolerate Mordecai's conduct, since Mordecai had told them he was a Jew. Now this is almost like maybe more of The Bachelor, or at least some soap opera. Okay, so they're talking to Mordecai, hey, why aren't you doing what the king said? We're afraid you're going to get in trouble. I don't think they're really thinking about him too much, because when they don't get through to him, they go tattle on him, and stir up some more trouble. Okay, now there's already trouble, but they stir up some more. So Mordecai gets asked by them. He's disregarding Haman, but it also means he's disregarding the king, because that was the king's command, evidently. So verse 5, when Haman saw that Mordecai would not bow down or show him respect. So this says they've been asking Mordecai day after day. So obviously Haman's been riding in and out day after day. This has happened several times. When he saw that Mordecai would not bow down or show him respect, he was filled with rage. He had learned of Mordecai's nationality as a Jew. So he decided it was not enough to lay hands on Mordecai alone. Instead, he looked for a way to destroy all the Jews throughout the entire empire of Persia. So remember, the Persian Empire was 127 provinces that extended from India in the east, all the way through the Middle East and down to Ethiopia in Africa. It was a huge kingdom. And he wants to destroy all the Jews that live anywhere in the kingdom, not just Mordecai. He's that enraged. Now remember, he's an Amalekite. They are ancient enemies of the Jews. So that's part probably of his reason for his rage. So if you look at it like it's written, this is where the whole reason for the book sits, with Mordecai's actions. That causes Haman's rage, which causes this whole thing to be set in motion that we're going to be reading about from here till the end of the book. So Mordecai, you can probably say, is somewhat responsible for this turn of events. So other places in the Bible that you've heard of someone really standing strong for their conviction. So Daniel on the threat of being thrown into a lion's den. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, also in the book of Daniel, on the threat of being thrown into the fiery furnace. Joseph refused to commit adultery with Potiphar's wife. She told on him, she lied on him, and now he's in prison for several years because of that, when he was a very high official in Potiphar's house before. Jesus, of course, people persecuted him. He stood for his convictions. The apostles, Paul, all of the apostles were martyred for their faith except for John. Okay, I mean, like killed, like not in a nice way. So want to look at a few things about Haman. How much pride do you have that one little Jewish guy not doing what you want fills you with rage so that you are willing to take on a war against a whole nation of people? Let me repeat that. One Jewish guy who won't bow to you and give you what your ego wants. So how much pride is that? It's a lot. It's ugly. It's really ugly. How much of the world's problems have been based on someone's pride? Okay? I'm not getting into politics, but just look around Washington, D.C. And it's on either side of the aisle. I don't care what party you prefer. It's everywhere. Okay? Lots and lots of pride. So power corrupts very, very easily. Note how cruel he is, Haman. He would not be satisfied to just do something with Mordecai. He could have him beaten. He could have him thrown in jail. Worse yet, he could have him killed or kill him himself. And that's not enough. That does not satisfy his rage. He wants to massacre a whole nationality of people for his own ego. So that is a lot of cruelty. So it says in verse 7, so in the month of April, and if you read this in a translation like King James or something, it's going to give you the Jewish month, like the month of Adar and the month of Nisan. But this is New Living Translation, and it just gives us the month, how the Jewish calendar lines up with the calendar we use. So in the month of April, here we are, y'all. Okay, the anniversary. In the month of April, during the 12th year of King Xerxes' reign, lots were cast in Haman's presence, and the lots were called Pur or Purim, P-U-R-I-M or P-U-R. And that's going to become important later. So this was like casting dice to determine what to do or when to do something. So lots were cast in Haman's presence, and the lots were called Purim. to determine the best day and month to take action. And the day selected was March 7th, nearly a year later. So it was 11 months. So what it means is the Jews are fixing to find out their fate, and they've got 11 months to dread it. Ooh, like how pitiful is that? So one of the commentaries I read, this is a new thing that I came up with when I was studying for this particular time. So you would cast these lots or these pure to determine something. And your belief was that the gods would make things line out and it would be the right day for this. Now we're going to find out that Haman's not serving the correct God, and so it wasn't the right day. It did not work out. I just gave away the end of the story, but probably y'all knew it. And so when lots were cast under God's guidance, and there are occasions in Scripture where that happens, it works out. Like he lets them know this is when this is supposed to happen. But he's not in this. God is not in this particular event. So Haman is using astrologers and sorcerers and things like that, which is probably pretty common in the day. So they come up with this date, 11 months away. Verse 8, then Haman approached King Xerxes and said, y'all listen to this. Listen for the falsehoods. There is a certain race of people scattered throughout all the provinces of your empire. True statement. There is a certain race of people, and they are scattered throughout the provinces, who keep themselves separate from everyone else. Not really. Okay. There's not like temple worship going on, evidently, in Persia amongst the Jewish community. Okay. People may know they're Jewish, but Persia was a melting pot. Remember, there's Indian people in the kingdom of Persia, and there's Ethiopian people in the kingdom of Persia. And Persia is Iran, so there's Middle Eastern people in the kingdom of Persia. Jews are actually Middle Eastern, so they don't necessarily just like totally keep themselves separate. That's kind of a half truth. Their laws are different from those of any other people. Well, there's some spiritual laws, yes, okay, but they are living under the kingdom of Persia. They are following Persian law. The king is their authority. So that's pretty false. And they refuse to obey the laws of the king. Wrong answer. Because there's no indication that that's true. These are people who were settled in Persia who decided not to go back to Israel when they could. In the case of Mordecai and Esther, they were born in Persia. They had never lived in Israel. Persia's their home. They have community there. They have friends there. They have family. We don't know if maybe Mordecai was married to somebody, that they had some children of their own. It doesn't say. But there are connections. There are reasons that they didn't leave. So for them to not obey the laws of the king, they refuse to obey the laws of the king. Well, I think the king probably would have stepped in and taken some action already. And he says, so it is not in the king's interest to let them live. Do y'all realize he hasn't even told the king who the people are yet? He's not told the king what group of people he's even talking about. So he could be talking about like, hey, your brothers and sisters, O king. He's not said. And do you notice that Xerxes hasn't said, who are these people you're talking about? So it's not in the king's interest to let them live. Verse 9, if it pleases the king, they say that a lot in this book. If it please the king, issue a decree that they be destroyed. That's big. Not that they be fined, not that they be taxed, not that they be whipped, not that they be jailed, that they be not even just killed, y'all, that they be destroyed. It's a big word. And I, Haman, will give 10,000 large sacks of silver to the government administrators to be deposited in the royal treasury. So this is called bribery of a government official right here. It gets people in trouble these days, but corrupt governments really don't care. Okay. And 10,000 sacks is estimated to be 375 tons of silver. Now, I don't know what that looks like. I'd be interested to know, like, does it fill up a semi or a aircraft carrier? I don't know. What does 375 tons of silver look like? It'd just be fun to know. So if it please the king, issue a decree they be destroyed, and I will give 10,000 large sacks of silver to the government administrators to be deposited in the royal treasury. Okay, pretty sweet deal for the king. He's not even asked who the people are. Haman hadn't said. So the king agreed. So here's what the king has agreed to. And he doesn't even know who it is. He doesn't know how many people we're talking about. And he doesn't have the facts on what the offenses are that they have allegedly committed. They haven't committed any. Mordecai has refused to bow down, one man, in front of Haman. He hasn't refused to obey the king in any other way. He probably bows to the king when the king rides by. We don't know. But he's not done anything to call attention to himself before now. And the king approves the request of Haman. And not only that, y'all watch this. He confirms his decision by removing his signet ring from his finger and giving it to Haman, son of Hammedatha of the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. So notice that the author of Esther wants to be sure you know who this guy is and what he's about. Okay, he's not just Haman. He's Haman, the son of an Agagite and the enemy of the Jews. Now, the signet ring, okay? The signet ring was the king's seal. It is what made a law official. It's his signature on something. So, for example, this would be saying, oh, you just signed that contract for me that commits me to some big, humongous amount of debt. You just do it for me. Well, that would frankly be dumb, okay? But he's told Haman, yeah, sign that for me. Just write whatever you want to. Now, in verse 11, the king says, the money and the people are both yours to do with as you see fit. He turns the money down, which seems odd to me, but he did. And it's yours to do with as you see fit. Maybe like, hey, use it to help kill these people extra good. I don't know. And the people that you're talking about are yours to do with as you see fit. I don't know who the people are you're talking about, but whoever they are, doesn't matter. The people that you want to destroy, do with them as you see fit. Here, take my ring so it'll have an official stamp on it. Woo, this is big, okay? He must have been so under the spell of Haman that he just thought, you know, do whatever you want to. I don't know what Haman had done to convince the king he was a good guy, but something's going on. So, verse 12, on April the 17th. Now, I mean, they can take the Jewish calendar and our calendar and line it up and come up with a date, okay? April 17th, that is tomorrow, correct? I messed up on my days, but April 17th is tomorrow. So on April 17th, the king's secretaries were summoned. They're summoned by Haman. They're not summoned by the king. The king's nowhere to be seen in this little scene right here. The king's secretaries were summoned, and a decree was written exactly as Haman dictated. It was sent to the king's highest officers, the governors of the respective provinces, and the nobles of each province in their own scripts and languages. So they had it translated so everybody can be exactly clear what it says. Nobody's having to translate for themselves. And the decree was written in the name of King Xerxes and sealed with the king's signet ring. Dispatches were sent by swift messengers, so this is Pony Express, into all the provinces of the empire, giving the order that all Jews, young and old, including women and children, must be killed, slaughtered, and annihilated on a single day. Okay? Not just killed, but slaughtered and annihilated. Like, it's extra. Okay? Let's make it gory. Let's try to wipe them off the face of the earth. That's the result of his rage. And we've got a few days that have passed here. So he is still very enraged. All because one man will not bow down when he rides by on the street. So verse 15, at the king's command, the decree went out by swift messengers, and it was also proclaimed in the fortress of Susa. Then the king and Haman, what do y'all think they did? Sat down and had a few beers. A lot of beers. Corona beers, I think. Okay, don't y'all think they were drinking Corona? They sat down to drink, but the city of Susa fell into confusion. So people are devastated by this. And I don't think it was just Jewish people. I think there were Persian people whose neighbors, whose friends, I bet there had been intermarriages. So this is family members. You know, the kid's daddy, mama's Persian, but daddy's a Jew and he's fixing to die. So there are Persian people upset about all this. Okay. Maybe Persian people are working for Jewish people. It's their boss that's going to go, or their employee that's going to go, or their neighbor. So this is a big deal. And I would think part of the confusion is, why are we having to do it? Because what they've been told is, y'all are going to kill him. It's not the king's army that's going to come around and do it. Y'all are going to kill him. And guess how they got him to think it was a good idea? They said that whoever did the killing got to keep whatever belonged to the person they killed. So at first, I'm sad that you're my neighbor and we've been good friends for all these years and I don't want you to die. But then I find out I get your house and your wife's jewelry and your cows and your bank accounts and your 401k. Oh, maybe we're not that good friends after all. Okay, I'll take you out. I'll be working out until that day so that when it comes time for me to take you out, I'm stronger than you and I got bigger weapons. And I get your house and all your stuff. And so that's how they got the people to agree to do it. So the king was not even going to use his resources, his army, his soldiers to go take care of this. The people were going to do it. But I can't imagine that at the beginning they weren't confused as to why it had to be them. So I think there was devastation and unsettledness on a variety of levels. So this was a paragraph I read in a commentary, and I'm just going to read it to you. And it says, the lives of thousands of law-abiding subjects. Now remember, Haman told him they were not law-abiding. The lives of thousands of law-abiding subjects are tossed to the favorite, that's Haman, without inquiry or hesitation. He, Xerxes, does not even ask the name of the certain people, much less require proof of the charge against them. The insanity of weakening his empire by killing so many of its inhabitants does not strike him, nor does he ever seem to think that he has duties to those under his rule. They are his subjects just like Persians are his subjects, okay? He's responsible for them. He doesn't even know how many of them are going to be taken out. He didn't ask any questions, and Haman didn't give any details, but it's thousands and thousands of people. Careless of the sanctity of human life and too indolent to take the trouble to see things with his own eyes, apparently without the rudiments of the idea of justice, he wallowed in a sty of self-indulgence, and while greedy of adulation and the semblance of power, he let the reality slip from his hands into those of the favorite, that's Haman, who played on his vices as on an instrument and pulled the strings that moved the puppet. He's been played. He has no idea. He's been played, and then he got him drunk after that. So King Xerxes thinks he's had a good day. So that takes us to chapter 4. So there's no gap between chapter 3 and chapter 4, this case. But it says, when Mordecai learned about all that had been done, okay, and remember, his actions set the thing into motion. Now, he's not responsible for Haman's rage. Haman ought to be able to control his own little bad temper tantrum. But it's because of Mordecai's actions. It says he tore his clothes and he put on burlap and ashes, and he went out into the city crying with a loud and bitter wail. So in old Bible words, you hear sackcloth and ashes. But what do we make sacks, like feed sacks, out of, or they used to? Burlap. It's what we call burlap. It's rough, it's coarse, it doesn't make a very good garment. It's not comfortable. And you would rip your clothes, like your good clothes, and you'd put on this junky stuff and take ashes out of your home fire, not hot ones necessarily, but cover yourself in these gray, sooty ashes to indicate that you were in mourning. So that could be for a death, or that could be for some other kind of calamity like this. And he goes out into the city crying with a loud and bitter wail. He lets people see his grief. He's not at home with his head buried in a pillow going, he is letting it be known. And so it says he went as far as the gate of the palace, for no one was allowed to enter the palace gate while wearing clothes of mourning. And as news of the king's decree reached all the provinces, there was great mourning among the Jews. And they fasted and wept and wailed, and many people lay in burlap and ashes. So this is just a picture of the great sorrow that was going on, including Mordecai's sorrow. Now, we don't we don't have any indication that it means that he's sorry that he stood up to Haman, but he is obviously grief-stricken over Haman's decision to take this kind of action and Xerxes allowing it. Okay, so he doesn't know Xerxes yet, as far as we know, but Xerxes is sort of like his son-in-law because he raised Esther as like a daughter. So when Queen Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her about Mordecai, she was deeply distressed. She sent clothing to him to replace the burlap, but he refused it. So we don't really know if they came and told her there's this man who's making a scene outside the palace gate and it's really pitiful. And she said, oh, I feel really bad for him. Here, take him some clothes. Or they came and said there's a guy named Mordecai and she knew who they meant, but she didn't know why he was doing that. Okay, she had not been told. So she sends him some clothes. Maybe that's so he can get in the palace gate so he maybe can talk to her, but he refuses the clothes. He's not taking off his mourning clothes. So she sent for Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs who had been appointed as her attendant, so obviously a trusted person. And she ordered him to go to Mordecai and find out what was troubling him and why he was in mourning. So Hathach went to Mordecai in the square in front of the palace gate. So again, Esther does not know what this is all about. Her maids and her eunuchs came to her and told her what was going on, and she sent the clothes. They may have known she knew Mordecai somehow, but it doesn't seem that they have the full story, that he is her relative, which that would make them know she's a Jew, and it doesn't seem that that news has come out yet. So verse 7, Mordecai told Hathach the whole story, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. So all the details. He wants to be sure she has all the details. Mordecai gave Hathach a copy of the decree issued in Susa that called for the death of all the Jews. He asked Hathach to show it to Esther and explain the situation to her. He also asked Hathach to direct her to go to the king and beg for mercy and plead for her people. So Hathach returned to Esther with Mordecai's message. Now, if Mordecai's message was in a sealed letter, that would mean Hathach might not know now that Esther's a Jew. But it doesn't say that. It says, here, take this decree and show it to her and tell her to beg for mercy and plead for her people. So it seems that now Hathach knows that Esther's a Jew because he knows Mordecai's a Jew. Verse 10. Then Esther told Hathach to go back and relay the message to Mordecai. All the king's officials and even the people in the provinces know that anyone who appears before the king in his inner court without being invited is doomed to die unless the king holds out his gold scepter. And the king has not called for me to come to him for 30 days. So Hathach gave Esther's message to Mordecai. So Hathach is being the carrier pigeon right now, back and forth, back and forth. And what it seems that Esther is saying here is, dear, dear uncle, you must be not thinking straight, or you must have forgotten, because everybody knows, all the king's officials and even the people in the provinces know that for someone to appear before the king without an invitation could mean their death right then, right there. You must not be thinking straight. You're asking me, your daughter, basically, to go risk my head with the king. Well, he was thinking straight. So she's a lot like Moses was when God said, go lead my people out of Egypt, and Moses stuttered around and said, I can't talk, and had all kinds of reasons why he couldn't do it. And this is kind of what that's like. She's saying, I don't think this is going to work out. And Mordecai tells her different. So the deal about being invited to the king, I mean, this is how special he thought he was. You didn't come unless he invited you. Remember about the concubines. They never saw him again unless he called them by name. Well, what are the chances he's going to remember the name of that girl that was cute that he saw, a year and a half ago? So going to the king uninvited was a no-no. Also, he has not called Esther to come to him in 30 days. Okay? She's his wife. So he hadn't like been to dinner. She hadn't gone and slept in his bed. They haven't had a conversation about the budget, nothing. Okay. Hadn't caught a movie together, no date night. She hadn't seen him in a month. So she is surely thinking, I think he's lost interest in me. What's wrong? Maybe he's angry at me and I don't know it yet. Oh gosh, remember what happened the last time he got angry at a queen? It did not go well for her. So you can only imagine what's been going through Esther's mind for probably 3 weeks out of this last month. Anyway, like, really? He's not ever gone this long without seeing me. And she doesn't have a way to ask him what's wrong. He's not coming around and she can't go to him. So she just has to wonder. Well, if you're sitting wondering, how many of you know that your mind tends to go right down the drain? Okay. Like, you're not going to come up with all the reasons that he probably does still love you and everything's fine. No, you're thinking about how this could go really, really wrong. And that's worry. I mean, that's where 97,000 of the things you're thinking of never happened. Just maybe one of those things you're thinking of, but you come up with 97,000 scenarios that could happen, and they're all bad. So she's probably been doing this for weeks. And then Mordecai shows up and says, go talk to him. And she's like, what? So there's legitimate reason for concern. Now, one of the things that's brought up in some of the commentary is, why didn't she just send a message to the king and request an audience? I don't know, but it never comes up that that's one of the possibilities. Mordecai says you need to go to him. So one of the things that I think might be the case is, like, if she'd requested an audience and he sent a message back and says, why? And then she has to tell something and kind of word gets out, it gets suspicious, and then maybe she doesn't get to see him. Maybe Haman figures out she knows something and talks the king out of seeing her. And then that kind of endangers her life even more. So the direct approach in Mordecai's eyes seemed to be the better approach. And remember back a while that she was still listening to Mordecai and following his wisdom. And so it seems that 5 years later, she's still doing that even now. So verse 13, Esther has sent the message back that says, you must have forgotten that for me to go to the king, I would be risking my life. And Mordecai sent this reply to Esther. And y'all, this is kind of the central theme of this book right here. And he says, don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace, you will escape when all the other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just such a time as this? Hence the title of our study, okay? Hence the post on the Facebook page for you to write down your purpose. Why have you been called to this position and this place and this time for such a time as this? Why are you here in the middle of this pandemic and not some other? What is there for you to do that could make an impact on somebody? Because we're not the queen, but we're God's princess daughters. We're royalty in the Father's house. Okay, we got a job to do. It's kind of like the royals in Britain, except for, Harry and Meghan, who bugged out. They're working royals. They have stuff to do for the kingdom. They're not just laying around eating bonbons. So we're working royals. Okay, and so was she, at least at this point. So notice here that God is never mentioned, like we said, anywhere in the whole book. But look what we have right here. When he says, if you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place. Well, who do you think he's talking about that's going to bring about deliverance for the Jews? Because the Jews are waiting on deliverance. They're waiting on Messiah to come. Now, I don't know that they think Esther's Messiah all of a sudden. That's not indicated at all. But they are many times throughout history in need of deliverance, a lot of deliverance. And what Mordecai is saying is, you have free will, Esther, and you can choose not to do what it seems like you have been put in place to do. And so God will have another option. I don't know that I would call it plan B. It's just that he's going to get his purposes accomplished. But I think it's you, Esther. And do you really want to go against what you've been put here to do? So It's interesting that he did not allow his relationship to Esther to sway him. He did not say, but since you're my baby girl, I can't stand to see you walk into that throne room uninvited. So let's come up with plan B ourselves. But as parents, because he was basically a parent to her, what would we have done? You know? I've always thought if my kid decided to go in the military, I'd be the mother that was like hanging on around the ankles while he dragged me down the driveway trying to get in his car to go to boot camp. Because, you know, how do you send your child off into danger, you know, or something like that? We send our children off into danger every second of every day. But, you know, this is a special kind of releasing her to go fulfill her destiny for the good of thousands of people, a whole nation of people. Now, remember something else. So go back to Genesis, and I'm not going to take us back there, but God told Abraham he was going to be the father of many nations. And so when God told Abraham to take his only son, Isaac, now remember there's Ishmael, but Ishmael's not part of the line, okay? He was the servant girl's son, and he's the father of the Arab races. But he told Abraham, you're going to be the father of many nations, and your descendants are going to outnumber the stars. And then he tells Abraham, take your only son Isaac, go up this mountain and sacrifice him to me. And Abraham packs up, gets his son, who goes with him, and goes up the mountainside. And the son even says, Daddy, where's the sacrifice? Like, where's the lamb that we're supposed to sacrifice? We didn't even bring an animal. And Abraham says, God will provide a ram. So Abraham had such faith because he knew what God had promised. God had promised that this nation was going to live on and be the way for the Messiah to come. And Mordecai knows that if Haman wipes out this whole race of people, that can't happen. So God must be going to deliver somebody from something here, because he already said these were going to be his people. So that's a lot of faith, although God's never mentioned here, although we have no evidence that Mordecai is like some really seriously practicing Jew in Persia. But do you see God all over it? He's everywhere, never mentioned. You got to look for him. So, verse 15. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. So they're talking back and forth still. Go and gather together all the Jews of Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will do the same. And then, though it is against the law, I will go in to see the king. And if I must die, I must die. So in old Bible language, it says, if I perish, I perish. Ooh. So why would she have him gather the Jews together to fast? And why would she and her household fast? So the only biblical reason for fasting to occur was for prayer. They didn't do it to lose weight, okay? It was for prayer. Now, prayer is not mentioned by the person who wrote this book. Remember, he's writing it in a pagan society where to write down about belief in God and how God did this and God did that could have caused a lot of trouble. But that's why you fast, or why it happened in those days. So there's the prayer part of it right there. 3 days, no thing to eat or drink, night or day, for 3 days. So Mordecai went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. Now remember, she's been doing what he wants all this time, but this time he does what she says. So it's one way of confirming the authority she does have as queen. Now, up against the king, she doesn't probably have much. If he said jump, she jumped. But she's the queen of Persia, the largest kingdom in the known world. And he's respecting her authority. So he went and did what she ordered. So I read a commentary that's not very favorable toward Esther. I've referred to it before. And that guy basically said, how terrible. She went and sought, made her request of the king before she made her request of God. And I think he missed it, the guy that wrote that, because there it is right there. She went to God first. Why else would you fast and starve yourself for 3 days? If it's not for prayer, there's no point, except you're going to get hungry and weak. So lessons here about the providence of God. So I want you to latch onto that word providence. That's kind of our word for the night. So what is providence? Providence is God's care and protection accompanied by his foreknowledge. So basically, he looks ahead and prepares the way in a way that we are cared for and protected. That's providence. It's also the capital of Rhode Island, but anyway. So things you can learn about the providence of God. His power still works in the world, not just then, but today too, to accomplish his purposes. If he promises it, it is going to come to pass, period, end of story. Okay? Does it come to pass like we think it ought to? Nope, not usually. I hate it when I think I have a brilliant idea and God decides to have a smarter one. I don't really hate it, but you know what I'm saying? God probably hates it when I'm trying to tell him about my brilliant idea and think he should do mine. So sometimes we don't know what he's going to do. And sometimes when he does it, we're like, what? But he's going to get his will accomplished. Mordecai knew that God uses human agents to accomplish his providence. But maybe he doesn't always particularly depend on a certain human agent. So for example, Esther and all the rest of us have free will. God can say, this is what I have for you to do. And we can say, nope. But he's going to get it done if it's his will. He's not going to force us. He gives us free will. We can walk away and go our own way. There are consequences for that. And the blessings don't come that we would get from obeying God. But he's going to get his will accomplished. So he might not be using one particular person. So that's why Mordecai said, if you choose not to do this, relief and deliverance will arise from somewhere else. But I think it's you. God doesn't always have to have miracles happening to be working out his providence. So there's no miracles in Esther. Just an interesting side note. God may work his providence out way in advance. So you think about it. It's 12 years ago that, it's 9 years ago that the king divorced his queen and set the possibilities up for Esther to even become queen. It's 5 years ago that she became queen. And she's just been living in the palace doing, I don't know what queens do. I don't know what that is. Eating bonbons maybe. But God was working way back then. So even though Esther decided, even though she could not be sure that God intended to use her, Mordecai insisted it. And she listened. He basically was telling her, you have a special advantage and it's a waste unless you use it. So that gets back around to our purpose. Where has God placed you? What special advantages do you have? Who do you know? Who do you encounter every day, maybe in your job? I see a couple of people on here in healthcare. I've had conversations with you about the people you encounter, your patients, and how you have some God-ordained conversations that maybe impact those people, that maybe lead to some kind of healing for them. Maybe they were healed in more than one way, not just physically in your clinic or your hospital, but emotionally and spiritually because of you using your influence. So don't knock it, girls. Don't think you're bragging if you say, I feel like this is what God's given me to do. I feel like that he's given me a gift for this or a talent. That's not bragging. That's just acknowledging what the Father's given you. So we're going to go a little bit into chapter 5. On the third day of the fast. Okay, nothing to eat or drink, y'all, for 3 days. I can't get through the hour without taking a drink. And I really am going to want a snack after this too. Okay? She's gone 3 days. I would think after 3 days, my blood sugar would be low. I'd be weak. I'd be shaky. I'd probably be crying for a ding dong. Okay, or a chicken leg or something. I'd be cranky. You know, they call it hangry. Think about all that. And now she's going to go risk her own life. And she's got to dress up to do it. And probably wear high heels. And jam bobby pins in her head to keep her tiara on. Hey, I got a new tiara. Did y'all notice? It's new. And it has combs and a little headband. It's so much better. You should never just have one tiara. It's like shoes. Okay? So she gets up on the third day of her fast, and this is interesting. It says she puts on her royal robes. She does not put on her sexy negligee. She does not put on her tennis clothes to go have some fun with the king. She puts on her royal robes. It is a symbol of who she is. Now, she's not the queen of Persia without the king, but she wants him to remember this is the queen of Persia. And she puts on her royal robes, dresses like a queen, and enters the inner court of the palace just across from the king's hall. And it says the king was sitting on his royal throne facing the entrance. And when he saw Queen Esther standing there in the inner court, here it is, y'all, what's going to happen? We don't know. It could go either way. He welcomed her and held out the gold scepter to her. So Esther approached and touched the end of the scepter. I think in one of the Esther movies, she touches it and then she faints, like right there, passes out. I'm sure she needs a snack for one thing, but don't y'all know the tension was like off the chain? And she has this utter relief now, and probably all the adrenaline runs right out through her feet, and she has nothing to even hold her knees up. And she goes to the floor. I can imagine that happening. So she approached and touched the end of his scepter. And listen to this, y'all. He doesn't say, what do you want? Or what are you doing here? Do you not know if I was in a bad mood, I could have your head cut off? He doesn't say that. It says, then the king asked her, what do you want, Queen Esther? What is your request? I will give it to you, even if it is half the kingdom. Y'all remember how big this kingdom is and how much it's worth? Okay, and he's going to give her half. He hadn't even been to see her in 30 days. Like he hadn't really been acting interested in her, but maybe she showed up and he was like, oh yeah, I still think she's pretty. I like her. I'm going to call her up tonight. Okay, and by the way, I think I'll give her half the kingdom. And she replies, now what would you have replied? Okay, because I might have replied, hey, sounds good. Okay. And she replies, if it please the king, there that is again, let the king and Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared for the king. Now, I do not know if she got up early and was in the kitchen all morning. She has servants. But when she said, I have prepared, she might have had something to do with it. I figure she kind of set the scene. She decorated it beautifully. She picked the wine. She picked the menu. She had the best possible cooks to prepare it. And all she wants, she has dared to risk her life to come before the king to say, you and your homeboy over here, y'all come to lunch. It's already ready. And the king turned to his attendant. Okay, this is the king sitting on his throne conducting the business of a kingdom. And he turns to his attendants and he doesn't say, would you get out my royal calendar and let's find a time that I can squeeze in to go have lunch with my wife. No, he says, tell Haman to come quickly to a banquet as Esther has requested. So the king and Haman went to Esther's banquet. He dropped everything he was doing. First, he's offered her half the kingdom. I love you too, Caitlin. And he's dropped everything that he's got going on. And he said, hey, Haman, come on, we're going to lunch with, we got people signing I love you. Everybody do this right now. Everybody do that. And so dropped everything and he's going to lunch with the queen. And it says, and while they were drinking wine, because she knows he's a drinker, she's not going to probably serve him iced tea because he's going to go, well, where's the wine? And notice she didn't serve him Corona. While they're drinking wine, the king said to Esther, now tell me what you really want, because obviously she didn't risk her life to just come say, let's have lunch. And it wasn't just like, honey, I haven't seen you in 30 days. I want to be alone with you. She invited another guy. So the king knows there's something. Tell me what you really want. What is your request? And here he says it again. I will give it to you, even if it is half my kingdom. And Esther replied, this is my request and my deepest wish. Okay, that's big words right there. So you think she's fixing to tell him something huge. Yes, I want half your kingdom. Or I want you to save my whole race of people. But what she says is, if I have found favor with the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my request and do what I ask, please come with Haman tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for you. And then I will explain what this is all about. There's a buildup here, y'all. I mean, this is one of those like, seriously, Kathy, are you going to quit now and make us wait? Okay. So this is like, you know, the cliffhanger in the series that they leave you at the end of the season, like Downton Abbey, which is my favorite show ever. And you had to wait till the next January to even find out what was going on. This story is like that. It's like a soap opera. And I'm going to cut it off right there just for the fun of it. Now, obviously you have a Bible and you can read, but it's good, y'all. So I said tonight was the heaviest night. There's been a threat to a whole race of people and things seem really, really hopeless. And Esther has found out that she has to go risk her own head to keep from risking her head later. So either way, she's in grave danger. And the king is sort of acting crazy, like he's offered her half the kingdom, but she's kind of acting crazy. She said, no, all I want y'all come to have lunch. And then she says, he says, I'll give you the kingdom again. And she says, let's just have lunch again. So it's all looking really weird. Okay. So there's going to be a second banquet. But before there's a second banquet, there's going to be some stuff happen. I almost want to tell you, don't go read it. Okay. But I hate to say you don't read your Bible. Read something else. Read John or something. And it's going to get funny, y'all. It is going to get, it's like plot twist. It's like one of those movies you're watching where you go, oh, I never saw that coming. It's really like that. You may even laugh out loud. Okay. And it's a great story of, he got what was coming to him and we got to watch. So that's where we're going to end and we'll pick it up there next week. So the handout for tonight's lesson is kind of peachy colored. Okay. And it'll be posted on the Facebook page as session 3. And I talk about providence here. The noun providence comes from the Latin verb providere, meaning to foresee or provide for. With God in the picture, it becomes divine guidance or care coupled with his foreknowledge. It is God's foreknowledge that makes the difference in Esther's story and in our own stories, in that he is able to tailor his care and provision to directly meet our specific current and future needs, often before we are even aware that we have the need. So, do y'all think God doesn't know what's going on about coronavirus? And do you think foreknowledge being what it is, that maybe he wasn't surprised by coronavirus? Okay, and do you think maybe he knows the outcome of coronavirus? And do you think that maybe just as in every other occasion, scenario, event in the course of human history, he's got it worked out already? Okay. So the statement for this week, where it says, make this statement real for yourself today. There is no good reason why I cannot trust a Father who has total awareness of my current needs and future needs, even before I am aware I have a need at all, and who is committed to meeting those needs for my good. God is for me today and every day of my life. Okay. There are days when we forget that, or it just doesn't feel like it. You know, we go by feelings a little too much and we forget what truth is. And truth is, God said it. There's a bumper sticker that God said it, I believed it, so it must be true. And my pastor would say, you can leave out that I believed it. If God said it, it must be true. You don't have to believe it even. But why wouldn't I believe it if it's truth? So God's got it worked out for my good. And so the question that's going to be posted under #providence is going to say, if you think about the providence of God, his protective care combined with his foreknowledge, what are the barriers that keep you from totally trusting he is working all things out for your good? And then what are some evidences that the providence of God has been at work in your life? And how do you know it's God and not just coincidence? And I'm going to ask you on the Facebook thing to list one of each. Okay. What is a barrier to trusting God's providence, and how have you seen evidence of God's providence? And like, just list a short one of each. And it'll be under #providence. So there's #purpose, where you go put down your purpose for this time in our lives. What are you here to do? Why have you been brought to the palace for such a time as this? And then there's corona emotions, which is just how you're feeling. List 3 feelings you're having. You know, you can go back to that one if you're having 3 different feelings on a different day. That's fine. But y'all, don't skip that, because it's a blessing to the rest of the people that are reading them. Okay. And then this one is about the providence of God, hashtag providence. There's also still hashtag tiara. I guess I have to take a new picture. Melissa, I didn't go back and look, but I don't know that your new tiara has showed up on hashtag tiara yet. But, you know, if you're able to borrow a tiara from some little kid, get a selfie. It might be the only time you have a picture of yourself wearing the crown, and post it on there. That's just for fun, but it's okay for us to have fun. So let me pray us out of here, and we'll meet back here at 8:30 next Thursday for session 4. Father, again, I just thank you for this opportunity. I just thank you for your word and how you are good to allow it to be revealed to us, and how an ancient story can have so much meaning in our individual lives, even though we're not queens and we're not married to the king and we don't live in a palace, and we think we're of no use or purpose. But Lord, you just keep showing us different. So Father, would you help us to see things as they really are? Would you help us to see ourselves as we really are and as you see us, and to quit discounting ourselves and our purpose and our value, because we're girls and we do that all the time. And I can't imagine that you don't get kind of impatient with it, but I appreciate your grace and your mercy and how you love us through it. And so, Lord, would you just take us all from here safely for the rest of this week? Keep us healthy, Lord, and our families. Lord, would you just work out the situation with the virus and the economy and all the things we're worried about, Lord, because we can trust you to do that. You have our good in mind at all times. Lord, we just love you. Thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. Good night.